Okay, hello, everyone. This is another Love Your Liver live stream. I am Dr. Garrett Smith, also known as the nutrition detective around these parts. And today we have a fun topic on this is going to kind of blow people's minds about what autoimmunity is, because we've all been taught it's it's like our body's becoming dumb and attacking itself. And why would it do such a thing? And it makes absolutely no sense. But those of you who have been here long enough realize that the mainstream has to create narratives in the scientific world that do everything they possibly can to cover up the fact that our chronic diseases are toxicity and basically full stop. So, anyways, I forgot to announce it is March 31st, 2023, and I wanted to do a little update on myself, because for those of you who purchase supplements from us, we do have those keystone minerals and the lactoferrin, and we were out of both of them for a little while. And I wanted to just let you know what I noticed as other people have been reporting, including Julie. Those of you who know Julie, she's my lovely practice manager, and she's the logistics lady and the supplements lady and all that stuff. But we got the lactoferrin back last Thursday. And so Julie and I immediately, we were the first to get it. So we both started taking it. And the funny thing was I'd been taking the lactoferrin for so long, probably going on 2 years now, that I hadn't noticed. I didn't notice what it did for me anymore. And in true to what I tell people to do, I say, if you're not really noticing a supplement doing something, maybe you don't need to take it, right? Why load your liver with more stuff if you know you don't need it? So funny thing was I took an unplanned break from the lactoferrin for something like 2 months, and I got it back last Thursday. I think I started with one pill the first day, because now those of you who aren't familiar with the lactoferrin, there are specific. I take a lot of care in making sure that people don't push things too hard. And if you, on the label of the lactoferrin and in the Love Your Liver program, there are very, very specific instructions to go up slowly on lactoferrin if and when you want to do it. I generally suggest that people fix their minerals first, and then the lactoferrin comes later, because the lactoferrin is very, very potent in terms of increasing bile production. And if you do that too soon, you may have a bad time. So if you're going to do lactoferrin, there's a link on the bottle to start slowly. I suggest you get some of those little teeny measuring spoons, the fractional teaspoons or the micro teaspoons, whatever they're called. They're on the website. You can get them from us. You can get them from Amazon, whatever. But anyway, I got back on the lactoferrin, and I had worked up to 2 pills a day, which is way more than many people can ever handle. Some people can only handle a 64th of a teaspoon or less. So just be wary. I had 2 buddies of mine, 2 guys who are into fitness and lifting and jujitsu and all that stuff. And I told them to start slow, and they didn't. They both kicked their own asses. It's not a joke. This is not a game kind of thing. It's very, very potent. Anyway, so I got back on it. I just kind of jumped back in, because sometimes I'm like that. And I started noticing I think it was Tuesday, I was like, wow, my motivation to get back into the gym has been amazing. I've been doing, my hour-long walks and the gym some days, and doing at least the hour walk or the gym on other days. And I was getting more stuff done. I was more productive in my day. And I was like, what did I change? And then I thought, oh, the lactoferrin's back. And Julie and I had our weekly staff meeting where we meet at a restaurant to get, to meet in person, because one of the things I hate about working at home is you don't get to hang out with people, right? It's lonely in that way. You don't get to get that person-to-person energy. So Julie and I meet once a week at a restaurant to get stuff done and just to reconnect. And I started telling her about my thing, and she goes, the same thing happened to me. And I was like, oh, this stuff, I love this stuff. I love the lactoferrin. And it is our biggest selling product for a reason. And people were very upset that we were out. So if you ever want to try it, just read the instructions. follow that link. I have a link for people on the general internet. It's basically the same information. I have a link on how to start lactoferrin slowly on our website for everybody to see. And then I have a link in the Love Your Liver program. Please, if you're one to jump in the deep end and you're just going to be like, I don't want to open up a pill and take less than a pill. I'm just not going to do that. I'll just take a whole pill. Okay. You could take a whole pill of possibly whoop ass. It's cool. It's fine. You can do that. As the saying goes, if you're going to be dumb, you better be tough. Okay? So just, you were warned. It's great stuff. It's strong stuff. Strong medicine has strong effects for better or worse. Okay, so let's get into the autoimmunity is foundationally toxicity. Then we'll get, I already saw the super chats, so thank you. It was kind of cool to walk into the video area and see in the chat that there was already 2 super chats. So I thank you very much for those. We will get to those. But I have this old post on my research forum. So I put the link in the video info. Oh, one thing I forgot to say is for those of you who haven't heard me say this, if you're here in the chat, we got 37 people in the chat. We only got 11 likes. So if you're here in the chat right now, if you can X out of the chat and go like the video, that will help spread the word. So you know, the computers decide to share this with other people. And then, so go and subscribe. And if you're in the chat, you're already, go and like. And then if you're in the chat, you're already subscribed. But don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And then don't forget, if you're here watching this later, to like and leave a comment, even if it's just an emoji or a W or whatever you want to leave. You know, that's I always like, I forget, I want to see where it was. One of the things, I hope I don't ruin this name, but Jurre, Yuri or Jur, or I don't know how to say it. I'm sorry. But he always puts on the comments, he puts 80, like if it's the 86th episode, he says 86 times brilliant or 87 times brilliant. I always get a kick out of that one. So I love seeing that one. That one's a cool one. That's his like signature comment. Anyway, let's get into it. So if you want this link, if you want to follow along with me, I'm very proud of this post. And it was still in progress back in the day, but you'll get it by the time it's done. So it's a long post. So we're not going to get to the questions until later. Basically, autoimmune disease. Does modern medicine have any idea what causes it? They either have no idea or they are unwilling to say it. Let's just put it that way. What do they do to autoimmune people? They give them more poison. They say there's too much immune system activity and it's ruining your cells. And so what do? What does modern medicine do? This is the simple thing to understand allopathic medicine. If it's too hot, make it cold. If it's too dry, make it wet. If there's too much of something, if there's, too much of this, then reduce that. Like that's what they do. Instead of thinking, why is the body doing this? What are the root causes of this? Rockefeller medicine, they don't want to fix anything. So they just give you poisons to make your body do the opposite. And then eventually the effect of the poison wears off because you've been more poisoned. And then you get the problem back, plus new problems from the poison that they've been giving you. Okay? So I don't really care about conventional medicine's theories on autoimmunity. I can tell you that the alternative community's theories on it aren't much better. Other than the idea that they say, oh, you need to detox, and then they give you a bunch of herbs that make you crap your brains out. I don't care about that idea either. So do I believe that the autoimmunity, the theory of it being a poor, dumb body attacking itself because the immune system has somehow lost its way and become confused, and it's friendly fire and collateral damage, and the body's just trying to attack itself? No, that doesn't make any sense. Our bodies are always doing the absolute best they can in the situation they are given. There is potentially the idea that autoimmunity, kind of like we've talked about with cancer being the body creating new tissue areas to store toxins because it absolutely cannot store them anywhere else anymore, that it is the body's best solution at the time to try to address this toxicity problem. Okay? So I don't like that there's a lot of super restrictive diets out there. Like people come to me from the autoimmune paleo world and they're like, yeah, it sort of helped maybe for a little bit, but I never got any better. Like they never got better. They just stopped getting worse until all the stuff like the sweet potatoes and the other stuff that's high in vitamin A overflowed the problem. Now remember, okay, folks, remember, retinoic acid and carrot juice are often used to treat cancer. And they're both, retinoic acid is used as a chemotherapy. Retinoic acid is used as a vaccine adjuvant. Beta carotene in carrots would turn into retinoic acid. So they are all using retinoic acids effectively. Well, not effectively. They're using it to treat cancer. They're treating cancer with a toxin, which reduces bile production. And for those of you who are familiar with toxic bile theory, it reduces bile production. So you can sometimes see the cancers go down in size for a while. And then what you see is as soon as they stop the chemo or as soon as they stop the massive doses of carrot juice, the problem comes back because the liver starts making bile again. And the bile was the root cause of the problem. And then it comes back even worse because now they're even more toxic. So anyway, let's go into, so first, what is the definition of autoimmunity? This is from Johns Hopkins Autoimmune Disease Research Center. Very important people, right? They say it is these misdirected immune responses are referred to as autoimmunity, which can be demonstrated by the presence of autoantibodies. Okay, so they're saying autoimmunity means autoantibodies are present. Okay. And then they say in the same article, autoimmunity is present in everyone to some extent. So I want you to think on that for a second. Autoimmunity is present in everyone to some extent. What am I saying is present in basically everyone to some extent? Toxicity. And I forget if it's in this same article, but there was somebody who said, I remember reading this article, I'll probably never find it again, but they said, over time, we may discover that every chronic disease is autoimmune in nature. And I was like, oh, what am I saying every chronic disease is related to? Toxic bile, the toxins in the bile. Do you see how this all connects to toxic bile theory? Okay. And then they even go on to say autoimmunity is usually harmless and probably a universal phenomenon of vertebrate life. If we were poisoning the entire world, we're probably going to see it everywhere, right? Okay, continuing. This concept of autoimmunity as a cause of human illness is relatively new, and it was not accepted into the mainstream of medical thinking until the 1950s and 1960s. But wait, it's a universal phenomenon of vertebrate life, but it was only figured out in the 1950s and 1960s? And why are animals showing up with autoimmunity now too? Huh. Well, let's go to this article, Veterinary Autoimmunity, Autoimmune Diseases in Domestic Animals. Here's the quote. The first spontaneous animal model of autoimmunity was the New Zealand black mouse, discovered in 1959. Interestingly, though several models of induced autoimmunity were demonstrated in a variety of rodents, the recognition of autoimmune disease in dogs came somewhat later. Do you understand that autoimmunity is now a modern phenomenon? They couldn't even recognize it in animals until the late 1950s. Okay? And now it shows up everywhere in your animals. Gosh, what do they put in pet foods? We have lots of people on the Love Your Liver program who have figured out how to give their animals, especially dogs and cats, low vitamin A diets, but they can't do it with packaged dog foods and cat foods because they add vitamin A to all of them. They will not allow a prepared dog food basically to come out without vitamin A and copper and all these other garbage things added to it. They just won't let it happen. You have to feed like beef and other stuff to it. Okay, I'm not a vet, We do have a vet in the Love Your Liver program, and we do have people working together and seeing their animals get so much better when they get them off vitamin A. Weird that they found animal models of autoimmunity and people are now giving their animals lower vitamin A diets and their animals are getting better. Crazy, right? Probably just a coincidence. Okay. So they're saying here autoimmune diseases are thus defined when the progression from benign autoimmunity to pathogenic autoimmunity occurs. So they're saying you can have autoimmunity that doesn't hurt you, but it's only when it goes to pathogenic autoimmunity, right? So when they measure your antibodies in your blood for, let's say, thyroid antibodies, and they say it has to be less than, I don't know, 6. You know, your antibodies are, if they're less than 6, you're not autoimmune, but if they're above 6, you are autoimmune. But you have the antibodies, and that's the sign of autoimmunity. So if you have any antibodies, does that basically mean you're toxic to some level? Possibly. Continuing their quotes, this progression is determined by both genetic influences and environmental triggers. Let us remind ourselves, genetics loads the gun. Environment pulls the trigger. This is a common saying by geneticists. Environment means everything inside and outside your body. What you put in your body, good stuff and bad stuff, whether you wanted it in there or not. If it's getting in there, technically nutrition involves everything that goes in and out of your body. If you're breathing smoke, technically that can be considered nutrition. People think that nutrition assumes good things. It means stuff that's going in your body. Okay? Genetics loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger. All you folks out there who, let's say you've been told that you've got the MTHFR, you've got all this other stuff, and that's going to make it so you have to take these mega doses of B vitamins. Remember, those genetics you got those genetics from people in the past. And if you're sitting there and you're going, well, my grandparents weren't sick and their great grandparents weren't sick, and they were all really healthy people. And now there's me and poor me, I'm sick because I have the MTHFR. They all had it. You didn't get that genetics without them having it. You see what I'm saying? So if the MTHFR is a problem for you today, genetics, the genetics was the loaded gun, and it is the environment, the toxicities and deficiencies that is pulling the trigger. A gun where the trigger is not pulled doesn't do anything. You understand? Why didn't your grandparents need megadosed methyl tetrahydrofolate to live and be happy? They didn't, because the world was not as toxic. Autoimmunity showed up in animals in the late 1950s. Do you see where I'm getting with this? So, let's get into this. Oh, I gave an example in here about how my father, who was a dentist, died of prostate cancer before I knew about all this stuff. Okay? Rest in peace. He had prostate cancer. I started developing prostate issues, urinary issues, in my mid-20s. That funny thing was, when I went to the naturopathic medical clinic while I was in medical school, I guess because I was in my mid-20s and I'd tell them I was having some trouble pissing because I was trying to get help to fix it. I mean, I tried to fix it myself, but I tried to get help to fix it. They just kind of ignored it. I guess because I was too young, right? You're not the typical BPH guy in his 40s or 50s, so we're just going to kind of ignore the pissing problem that you mentioned. I was like, well, that was not very cool. But now I'm in my late 40s and I have no pissing problems anymore. That doesn't make, in the normal model, right, as you get older, you get more prostate problems. And I'm not taking any herbs. I'm doing the same thing I do for all of my people. Reduce toxins in, facilitate the removal of toxins, stored toxins, and give the body the nutrients that it needs. We do the same thing for everything. Okay? So let's get into this whole thing, the idea of shots, immunizations, vaccinations. How do they play a role in autoimmunity? This is still from the same Johns Hopkins article. Okay? Here we go. Hashimoto's thyroiditis and multiple sclerosis can be reproduced by immunizing the animal with an antigen analogous to the putative autoantigen of the human disease. They can induce autoimmunity in animals with an immunization. And what are we doing to our children these days? What's the current schedule? Is it like 76 shots? Autoimmunity is exploding. What can these shots cause in the liver? They cause liver injury, aka cholestasis, aka toxic bile leaking into the blood. What do I say is the root cause of all chronic disease? Okay. So let's continue down here. Here's another quote. When direct and indirect evidence to define an autoimmune disease are not available, investigators are left with circumstantial evidence, that is, with listing, quote, markers descriptive of autoimmune disease. Examples of these markers are, so they know you have a problem, but the blood doesn't show what they want it to show. So what do they go and look for then? A positive family history of the same disease or for other diseases known to be autoimmune. Genetics loads the gun. Environment pulls the trigger. Nature and nurture. What do we get from our parents? We get genetics. What do we also get from our parents? We tend to get eating patterns, food patterns, toxicity patterns. You inherit toxicity from your parents. This is why when people are like, but what about the Okinawans 100 years ago? Well, first of all, you're not an Okinawan most likely, and it's not 100 years ago. Were they getting 76 shots 100 years ago? No. Did every little sniffle, did they run to the doctor, get antibiotics for their little cold or flu or their ear infection? No, they didn't. They also probably didn't eat a lot of dairy there. Either way. Genetics loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger. It's nature and nurture. They work together. So if they're seeing a positive family history, right, we've got genetics, but we've also got the things you learn from your parents. Okay. Continuing, presence in the same patient of other known autoimmune diseases. Those of you who have followed autoimmunity know that when you get one autoimmune disease, if it's not dealt with, you tend to get another one later and maybe another one. Does it make sense that the toxicity problem is getting worse? And that what's happening is the weak links in the chain, first it breaks the first weak link. And then it finds the second weakest link. And then it finds the third weakest link. So it's a progressive problem. This would be like if, let's say, somebody gets put on a drug for autoimmunity. It might help their first symptom by poisoning them. But anyway, they're not dealing with the root cause. So then another problem comes up later because the original problem is festering and slowly getting worse. Nothing about the original problem is getting better. And actually, the meds are slowing down detox. They can relieve symptoms, but they're actually slowing down detox. Okay? So, other things. Presence of infiltrating mononuclear cells in the affected organ or tissue. Preferential usage of certain MHC class II alleles. Here we go. High serum levels of IgG autoantibodies. Okay? And then the deposition of antigen antibody complexes in the affected organ or tissue. Well, then they talk about improvement of the symptom with the use of immunosuppressive drugs such as corticosteroids. Well, I need to find that research. I may have to ask for some help from some of my Love Your Liver superstars in finding the episode of the Inner Circle where I went over corticosteroids and what they did in dogs, and it slowed down bile production. Absolutely shut down bile production. So weird that if I'm saying that chronic disease, especially autoimmunity, is caused by too much toxic bile in the blood, and corticosteroids specifically shut down bile production. The studies are in dogs. Weird that those would work. Why would corticosteroids reduce autoimmunity symptoms? Are you following? So, continuing, common threads uniting the autoimmune diseases are the presence of an autoimmune response based on cumulative genetic risk factors combined with an environmental contribution, infectious, chemical, physical, or other. Equally important, innovative treatments applied to one autoimmune disease may be useful in others. Well, so we want to, so there's nature and nurture. Okay. Now, we talked about immunizations. You guys know I talk about vitamin A toxicity. Okay. Now let's go into adjuvants. Adjuvants are things that are added to vaccines to increase the immune response when they are given. If you've figured out yet that the immune system is basically your body's cleanup crew, it's more of a cleanup crew. If we start thinking that most disease is toxicity, nearly all disease is toxicity, and then we start thinking about the immune system's role in that, and we understand that the immune system is your cleanup crew. What do you think takes these poisons to your liver? Okay. Then giving something like an adjuvant that increases the immune response. You see the white blood cells go up. Does it make sense that they just put a poison in? They use aluminum as an adjuvant, right? There have been I have tons of studies here of retinoic acid, the active form of vitamin A, as a vaccine adjuvant. They have studied it. Okay, so vitamin A is used as chemotherapy, and chemotherapy is generally properly regarded as poison. And the active form of vitamin A is used as an adjuvant, or studied as an adjuvant in vaccines. A couple episodes back, I went over the interesting coincidences of retinoic acid and some of the newer pokies. So, let's skip some of this stuff. Okay. Oh, so what I was going over here was Asia. Autoimmune/inflammatory syndrome induced by adjuvants, ASIA. So adjuvants put in vaccines can cause autoimmunity. Aluminum, mercury, vitamin A. Weird pattern, right? Now let's go down here and see that what else can cause autoimmunity. Here's the paper, autoimmunity associated with the immunotherapy of cancer. Immunotherapy. Okay, so let's take this quote out of the paper. It is becoming increasingly clear that many immunotherapies can lead to immune reactions against normal tissues. Immunotoxicities resulting from treatment can range from relatively minor conditions such as skin depigmentation. So they consider vitiligo to be a minor thing. It might be a major thing in your life, but they just consider it a minor thing. Anyway, to severe toxicities against crucial organ systems such as liver, bowel, and lung. Continuing, it is probable that serious adverse events from immune-mediated reactions will increase in frequency and severity as immunotherapeutic approaches become more effective. It got more effective, but it will also increase the frequency and severity of immune-mediated reactions. As the saying really should go, when modern medicine treats cancer, they're hoping that the cancer dies first before you're dead. That's really their idea. They're like, we're going to give you this poison. Hopefully the cancer dies before you die. And as everybody who's had a loved one go through these treatments, you know that it's basically how long the body can last against the treatments before the treatments kill the person. So they're saying that giving people immunotoxins, you like how they start out with immunotherapy and then they turn it into immunotoxicity? Yeah. So another paper, cancer and autoimmunity, autoimmune and rheumatic features in patients with malignancies. Rheumatism, which is autoimmunity, like rheumatoid arthritis, stuff like that. Rheumatism after chemotherapy, a clinical entity characterized by the development of musculoskeletal symptoms after combination chemotherapy for malignancy. Conclusion, autoimmune and rheumatic features are not rare among patients with malignancies because they were poisoned. Autoimmunity is a poisoning. It is a toxicity. They can give you autoimmunity by poisoning you. That's what they're saying. Another paper, immunotherapy of autoimmunity and cancer, the penalty for success. Ironically, effective tumor immunity requires the induction of the same responses that underlie autoimmunity. So maybe they get rid of, they shrink your tumors, but they give you autoimmunity at the same time because it's the same mechanism. They just said so. What if it's all connected to toxic bile? And what I'm going to tell you is that chemotherapy shuts down the bile production. So then you can see the cancer shrink for a while, but your liver becomes more toxic. They just gave you more toxins, and then you have a new disease pop up. Understand that so much of health is so misunderstood that you can do certain things that get rid of one disease state and they give you another disease state. Okay. So my little chemotherapy summary here. Chemotherapy has been shown to this is my statement. Chemotherapy has been shown to induce autoimmunity. Active vitamin A as retinoic acid is used as chemotherapy, as well as used as carrot juice too. Okay, so now let's go into the autoimmunity as a poisoning trail. So they say autoimmunity is associated with antibodies, specifically autoantibodies. Autoantibodies means self-antibodies. Okay, so what are antibodies exactly? Here's a definition I got off the internet. Antibodies are blood proteins produced in response to and counteracting a specific antigen. Antibodies combine chemically with substances which the body recognizes as alien, such as bacteria, viruses, and foreign substances in the blood. Antibodies combine chemically with substances which the body recognizes as alien, such as bacteria, viruses, and foreign substances in the blood. What do they measure to tell you have autoimmunity? Antibodies? Hopefully you're putting this together. So then, what are antigens? Antigens are a toxin or other foreign substance which induces an immune response in the body, especially the production of antibodies. Antibodies are proteins your body is making to protect you against poisons in your system. So what do they measure for viruses? How do they tell you how your viral load? Do they measure the actual virus or do they measure your antibodies? So therefore, are they measuring a level of toxicity in your system? If somebody could, I think Pierre, if you could, somebody posted on the network, if somebody could go find that post and put it in the chat, the one where somebody, the root of the word virus meant either toxin or poison. Can somebody go find that for me and then put it in the chat, and then I'll try to find it. Okay. So what I'm going to lay out here. Okay. So antibodies are a reaction to a foreign or alien or toxic or poisonous substance. That's it. Autoantibodies, self-antibodies. Could that be a reaction to a poison inside your body? Does that make sense? Or maybe if your body is somehow making things that are broken or not good for you, that then your immune system starts tagging proteins onto it to protect you. Okay. Here's a concept. If your body is under attack from poisons, do you want to be able to make antibodies? Yes, of course you want to be able to make them. Like, think of it like this. It's like a house security alarm, right? Your immune system and the things that it does to these things. It's like a security alarm, right? A home security alarm. It's there for a protective reason. You have it so it can be used, but you really don't want to use it because that means somebody broke into your house, right? Antibodies, same thing. You want your body to be able to make them because they protect you from poisons. But the presence of them floating around means that there is poison floating around in your system. You don't want that. So basically, we can come to the conclusion that things that increase antibodies of any type are by definition foreign or alien or toxic or poisonous. So what do they talk about with vaccine adjuvants, right? They increase the antibodies. That's how they judge whether they're successful or not. Huh. So let's go into the definition of autoantibody from the National Cancer Institute. An antibody made against substances formed by a person's own body. Do you actually think your body is making poisons? Autoantibodies can directly destroy cells that have the substances on them or can make it easier for other white blood cells to destroy them. Some autoimmune diseases are caused by autoantibodies. So what's causing the antibodies then? What's the root cause? Because the cells don't just make these things out of the blue. So let's look at this. From Toxins Journal, special issue, the toxin-antibody interactions. Quoting, antibodies are remarkable in their ability to inactivate even the most potent plant and microbial toxins. What's a plant toxin we talk a lot about here? Oh, carotenoids that turn into retinoids. It's called vitamin A. Here we go. Surprisingly, little is known about the molecular mechanisms by which antibodies actually neutralize toxins. Well, if you're familiar with Grant Generou's blog, he wrote a whole blog about how retinol binding protein is probably an antibody, a binding protein for vitamin A. We're talking about plant and microbial toxins here. Binding protein. So, your body makes proteins to bind to things to make them less toxic. Doesn't mean they're not toxic. It makes them to, as they know with vitamin A toxicity, if you don't have enough retinol binding protein, you have more free retinol, and you can get vitamin A toxicity easier. Okay. Here we go. The paper, Monoclonal Antibodies and Toxins, a Perspective on Function and Isotype. Here's the quote. Antibody therapy remains the only effective treatment for toxin-mediated diseases. Let's go again. Antibody therapy remains the only effective treatment for toxin-mediated diseases. So what is your body's only defense against toxins then? Why would vaccine adjuvants raise antibodies? Why would chemotherapy raise antibodies and cause autoimmunity? This should be making sense. So now let's go into this paper, Vitamin A and Retinoic Acid and the Regulation of Beta Cell Development and Antibody Production. Vitamin A and retinoic acid, which is the active form of vitamin A, often potentiate antibody production overall. Retinoic acid increased the proliferation of memory B cells. Sorry, it was B cell development, memory B cells, not beta. Retinoic acid increased the proliferation of memory B cells, and the increased rate of B cell proliferation was accompanied by increased secretion of antibodies. Retinoic acid promotes the expansion of a subset of B cells which undergo further differentiation both processes leading to the promotion of antibody production. Moreover, retinoic acid affects the FDC. I'm not going to look I'm not going to look up what that is right now. Retinoic acid promotes the expansion of retinoic acid affects the FDC to increase antibody production. All these processes together may help to explain the enhanced antibody production by retinoic acid observed in animal studies. Previous studies have shown that retinoic acid and PIC cooperatively enhance the secondary antibody response, as well as the primary antibody response in both vitamin A deficient and vitamin A sufficient animals. I hope you're following how much I went into antibodies bind to poisons and foreign substances in the body. And then we find that vitamin A is used as an adjuvant, it's used as chemotherapy, and it increases antibody production. And adjuvants can cause autoimmunity, chemotherapy can cause autoimmunity. You following? So let's keep going. I'm not going to get into that part. So from the paper Complement, Natural Antibodies, Autoantibodies, and Tissue Injury. Here's the quote. Our experiments demonstrate that naturally occurring antibodies and autoantibodies mediate tissue injury only after an organ has been subjected to a stressor, such as ischemia. So lack of flow. I hope you're following. So here's an interesting study. Prevnar 13 vaccine failure in a mouse model for vitamin A deficiency. Here's the quote. In a mouse model for vitamin A deficiency, we found that PCV13 failed to elicit binding and neutralizing antibody activities. So they gave the rats vitamin A deficiency and they didn't see antibodies pop up as much. Weird that they didn't see the toxin response go up in the vitamin A deficient animals. Weird, right? So then what happened? The effect, what about when they put vitamin A in combination with a vaccine? Effective dietary vitamin A on reproductive performance and immune response of broiler breeders. Supplementation of vitamin A quadratically affected antibody titer to Newcastle disease virus vaccine. They got a lot more antibodies when they added vitamin A supplements to a vaccine. If you remember when I talked about the pokies in a previous video and what might be in there, it's an interesting coincidence. Let's see. Oh, here's another paper. I'll just go over the title of this one. Toxin neutralization using alternative binding proteins. Like retinol binding protein. Toxin neutralization using alternative binding proteins is the name of the paper. Here's the quote. Toxins represent an extremely diverse field of targets ranging from small molecules that exert their function via a binding interaction with a target macromolecule. Small molecules exert their function via a binding interaction with the target macromolecule. This is where they try to say that, like, they're saying toxin neutralization, but then they're also saying it exerts their function. So this is where they're like trying to say that, okay, so it's a toxin, but it has a function. Does this sound like vitamin A, what we talk about, where they say it has a function, but we know it's toxic? Oh, I have the link here where it was, I've been over this before, the connection between when they tried to make a mouse model or a cellular model. I think it was a cellular model of celiac disease, and they could not make the celiac disease model in the cells until they added retinoic acid. Weird. They couldn't cause a specific autoimmune pattern in cells until they added retinoic acid. That link is in the forum post. Here we go. Alopecia areata, for those of you who are concerned about hair loss. Autoimmune hair loss is called alopecia areata. Here's the title of the study: Increased retinol binding protein and anti-R retinol binding protein 4 antibody in alopecia areata. Wait, so there's retinol binding protein is higher and anti-retinol binding protein antibody is higher. Retinol binding protein, if you don't know, retinol binding protein 4, the body makes it in response to how much vitamin A is there. And it's been said in multiple studies that retinol binding protein is a surrogate marker for how much vitamin A is present in the blood. So they're saying high vitamin A in the blood and the anti-retinol binding protein 4 antibodies. So is it even saying that retinol binding protein in a way is toxic to us? That then the body, so you make retinol binding protein to bind to a toxin, and then your body even makes antibodies to the retinol binding protein itself. From their conclusion, our data demonstrate that alopecia areata is associated with increased serum levels of retinol binding protein 4. That would mean more vitamin A is present in the system in general. Oh, here's another study where autoimmune eye disease was induced in mice by injecting them with retinol binding protein 3. Experimental autoimmune UVO retinitis in the C57BL/6J mouse is a model of non-infectious posterior segment intraocular inflammation that parallels clinical features of the human disease. Recombinant murine, that's mouse, subunits of the RB3 protein were purified and used to immunize C57BL/6J mice to induce experimental autoimmune UVO retinitis. I'm just going to go into antidote stuff here real quick. So for those of you who are taking, so this is what I always tell people, is that when you take something that's an antidote, which is not an essential nutrient, there are many, many things that I think are antidotes, and we use some of them in the program. But the antidote, if you don't need it, actually becomes toxic. Like you wouldn't take snake antivenom. If you get bit by a snake, you want the snake antivenom. But if you went and took snake antivenom every day, you would get sick from the snake antivenom. The antibodies themselves are toxic. But the idea that the body's trying to do the best it can is the body makes these proteins to bind to the toxin to make a less toxic situation. Okay. Okay. From another paper, paradoxical effects of all trans retinoic acid on lupus-like disease in the MRL/IPR mouse model. Paradoxical. So it means what they weren't expecting. After 8 weeks of all trans retinoic acid, also known as tretinoin or retin-A, folks, if you're putting it on your face. After 8 weeks of all trans retinoic acid, aka ATRA, significantly higher pathological scores in the skin, brain, and lung were observed. These were accompanied by a marked increase in B cell responses, remember earlier, that included autoantibody production and enhanced expression of plasma cell promoting cytokines. Wait, so they gave them active vitamin A and their autoantibodies went up. Crazy, right? I don't think I'm going to get into the citrulline stuff. Oh, sure, why not? Rheumatoid arthritis and citrullination. Okay. Here's the quote. Citrulinating enzymes, peptidyl arginine deaminases, or PADs, are tightly controlled to limit their hyperactivation. Okay, so you want to keep these PADs, the citrulinating enzymes, down. Studies suggest that citrullination is dysregulated both intra and extracellularly in rheumatoid arthritis. Okay? And there's this quote down here. Understanding how PADs are hyperactivated in patients with rheumatoid arthritis. Okay, so we now say the PADs, the citrulinating enzymes, are hyperactivated in retinoic acid. Okay? That's not retinoic acid. I saw the RA, rheumatoid arthritis. PADs, the citrullonating enzymes, are hyperactivated in patients with rheumatoid arthritis. I'm confusing my RAs, sorry. Now, another paper, molecular characterization of peptidyl arginine deaminase, which is the PADs, in HL60 cells induced by retinoic acid and 1-alpha 25-hydroxy vitamin D3, active vitamin D. What do I tell people not to take by mouth? Vitamin D also. We found that PAD activity in human myeloid leukemia HL60 cells was induced with the granulocyte-inducing agents retinoic acid and dimethyl sulfoxide, DMSO. I'm not a big fan of sulfur either. And with the monocyte-inducing agent 1-alpha 25-hydroxy vitamin D3. PADs convert arginine residues to citrulline residues in the presence of calcium ion. Weird. I tell people not to take in any of these things. Weird coincidence. So, that's the whole post. It was not finished. Hopefully you understand what I covered there. So whenever you hear antibodies in the future or autoantibodies, the only thing your brain should be thinking is poisoning. That's it. You've been poisoned. What are the poisons? Well, I just went over a big one, right? Your body is making antibodies and autoantibodies to try to protect you from something worse. That's it. They find them in a certain cell. Why might you find more antibodies and autoantibodies in certain organs or glands? What do you think that organ or gland might be collecting? Toxins. Where do they go? They go where the toxins are. This should all make sense. Your body is not attacking itself. It's trying to get the poisons out. And just like in a war, you send in a bunch of soldiers to go take an area, and then modern medicine goes in later and they look around and they go, well, there's all these dead bodies here because a freaking battle was fought. This is a battle going on between these toxins and your immune system. There's going to be casualties. How do we win? We stop putting the toxins in. We facilitate the removal of the toxins from the body that have already been stored, and we give the body what it needs to repair the damage and to protect itself. And this is why we see crazy health conditions go away. That's all we're doing. If people ask me, if you're out there and you want to ask me, what's your protocol for this disease? I don't have one. What's the magic pill? How much soluble fiber do I need? How much zinc do I need? I don't know. We do testing, but actually I want to emphasize something to you guys. The magic of what we do here, of what I do and what Nathan, my assistant, trainee, physician's assistant, he's been trained by me. What we are doing here, the magic is in the follow-up, which is included in your package. Funny thing. I don't nickel and dime you for follow-ups. I have people who come to my office hours, the included follow-up in each 6-month package. I have people come there every week to tweak things and adjust things. It's not one thing I never liked when I was doing the normal type of practice was just meeting people once and then being like, here's your treatment plan, assuming that I knew exactly what they needed to take, and then just sending them off. And then if they didn't feel good with what I gave them or what they weren't doing or what they were doing or any of that stuff, to check in on them, you had to, it's kind of a nickel and diming thing, right? So the patient doesn't feel good. This was what bothered me. Me as the practitioner, I'm giving a person something to do, and they go home and let's say they try some of the stuff and they don't feel good with it. They just paid me to tell them what to do. Maybe they bought supplements from me. This is the old me. And now they have to pay me again to tell them what to do now, even though it was they reacted negatively to what I did. Do you see how that's not cool to me? That is why the follow-ups, the troubleshooting is included for 6 months with the packages that we do. Because I freaking care about people getting better. Okay? That's the way we do things differently around here. We do. So let me get to these super chats now. Thank you all for hanging around. Remember to like and subscribe and comment and all that stuff so the computers know that you're all enjoying this. So, Ramon should just have a permanent super chat spot. Hey, thanks, Ramon. I appreciate it. Okay. Hi, Doc. Started having calf muscle twitching or jumping nerve every day for a year and a half now. HCLF, I'm assuming, is high carb, low fat. High carb, low fat, but as clean as possible. What could this be the result of? How could it be corrected? Thank you. Okay. So the very first thing that I think of when I hear calf or especially at night, if I hear calf muscles cramping or twitching, especially at night, I start thinking potassium deficiency. Now, you could just try increasing your potassium. But here's the other kicker to it. Several of the toxins that we deal with here, vitamin A blocks potassium channels. So what that means is that the potassium can't get back in your cell. So you seem to have deficiency symptoms. A person would seem to have deficiency symptoms. Even though there may be plenty of potassium there, it can't get back into the cell. Okay? And into the cell this way, like that. This is a bad image. Sorry about that. The potassium cannot get back into the cell. So the cell starts functioning like it's potassium deficient. Copper depletes potassium from the system. Old stored vitamin D supplements, which we don't like, come out, and those deplete potassium in the system. So let's say all these things would be contained in the toxic bile that the body's trying to get rid of. And if you were pushing detox too hard, pushing bile dumping too hard, and you were leaking more of these toxins into the bloodstream, this would then cause a secondary potassium deficiency appearance. And then you get potassium deficiency symptoms. So I want you to think of when people think of potassium, potassium is very individual. There's not a lot of high potassium foods that are not also high in vitamin A. People start going and looking for high potassium foods, and they're like, well, that's high in vitamin A, that's high in vitamin A, that's high in vitamin A, that's high in vitamin A. Why do you think nature does that? Do you think nature would have to protect the plants from the vitamin A too? It's funny when people look at it and they're like, but all these high nutrient foods all have high vitamin A in them. I go, do you think the plants have to protect themselves too? They do. No one is immune. So, toxins are toxins. It's like when people take anti-parasite herbs, and I'm like, go look up the liver injury profile of those herbs. If it's going to kill something, it's going to not be great for you either. It kills living things. Okay? Be aware of this. So, generally, you may, so Ramon, if you have adjusted your diet to really increase, let's say, soluble fiber, that may be pushing things too hard. If you read the agitators article in the Love Your Liver Network, you may be agitating things too hard with things like too much exercise or too hard exercise, too much sun, too much heat. These things. So you could either be pushing detox too hard, or you could just not be getting enough potassium. You could be doing both. And that's generally the things that I would start with. Potassium is the quickest thing that people can do to improve their symptoms on the program. Potassium is also the thing that people tend to make the biggest mistakes on or get a little lazy on. Don't be the person who comes to me saying, well, Dr. Smith, I tried taking a 99 milligram potassium pill, and I don't feel any different. I'm supplementing potassium, but I don't feel any different. Okay. A banana has 500 milligrams of potassium. You took a 99 milligram potassium pill, and you're wondering why you don't feel any different. Go eat a freaking banana and get 5 times that much potassium. You see? So that's the problem with potassium pills is they made them, they required that they were very low dose. Weird thing that in conventional medicine, when they give people certain diuretics, they can give them a 1,500 milligram potassium chloride pill. K-DUR, look it up, K-DUR. They can give them a 1,500 milligram potassium pill. But over the counter, they'll only sell you 99 milligrams. But potassium supplements can be very touchy for people. So I kind of actually like the small capsule size, especially when people are figuring it out. Generally, I suggest if you're going to mess with potassium supplements, get those smaller pills, or if you're going to do powder, you better measure. If you're ever going to mess with powders, you better be damn sure of how much you're measuring. You don't want to later be like, oops, I've been taking 4 times more than I was supposed to because I used the wrong measuring spoon. Seriously, this happens. Don't do it. You're going to have a bad time. So, potassium would be something to work on. If you're ever going to use potassium citrate, make sure it's not GMO. It needs to say, if you're going to use ever any citrate minerals, they must say non-GMO on them. If not, it's the mineral like magnesium bound to the citric acid that's made by a genetically modified black mold. And if you know anything about chemistry and isolating compounds, they can never get all the solvents out of everything. So you don't really want stuff potentially from GMO black mold in your supplement. So just make sure it's not GMO. That's an important thing, in my opinion. So, yeah. That's where I'd start. Potassium deficiency is the easiest thing to address. Simple, not necessarily easy. And I have several articles and a video, I believe, in the Love Your Liver program. So if you haven't seen that, it's in the Love Your Liver program. So important that in every treatment plan I give people, I link that article or that section of the network. Pretty important. I take this job seriously. But yeah, leg cramps, that's the first thing I think of. The next thing could be magnesium deficiency. So if the potassium doesn't work, I'd be putting topical magnesium on those areas. If you strangely notice that topical magnesium made this situation worse, that would be pointing back towards potassium, that you need more. So maybe less topical mag for a while, fix your potassium, make sure you're not pushing detox too hard. That's the general approach. Remember that most of my troubleshooting is taking people, rationing them back on the detox, not pushing things too hard. Because the only way you really find out that you're pushing things too hard is to get symptoms and go, ooh, guess I'm pushing things too hard. That's the way life is. You don't know you're there until you're there. This is why when people are like, well, I've been eating liver for so long and I'm fine and I'm not toxic. And I go, how much poison does it take? Just enough. You'll know you're toxic when you get there and you finally admit it. When do the symptoms show up? When you're toxic enough. I'm going to tell you guys something I've been realizing is the Accutane people or the Retin-A people, the people who took retinoic acids, in terms of straight vitamin A toxicity, those are the hardest to fix. They take the longest. Basically, they just take the longest. The next worst are these liver eaters. These high liver eaters, they're the second hardest to fix. Of course, there's exceptions everywhere, but I'm seeing a pattern now. Especially the young men who really got into the eating liver because they thought it was going to fix everything in their life, and then they're broke, and fixing that takes a long time. because not only did they eat a ton of vitamin A, but they also ate a ton of copper. Here's a funny little aside. I've been working on my Twitter thread about birth control pills, right? And so many women, so many of you ladies out there will say, if I were to say, what was the one medication or whatever thing you ever did in your life that you could say my health was never the same after that, would be birth control. The most common one for women. I was going over the research that's been shown over decades that shows that birth control pills raise vitamin A and copper in the blood indistinguishably. I mean, totally distinct patterns in the research. So all these vitamin A lovers, and it even increased the conversion of carotenoids, beta carotene, into retinol. It increased that conversion. So for all these vitamin A lovers and copper lovers, wouldn't birth control pill make women super healthy? Shouldn't that make sense? Why does it ruin women then? What are we talking about here? Vitamin A and copper ruin people. Ruin people. Makes sense in my world. I've got research since 1975 showing that birth control pills raise vitamin A and copper in the blood. There's a video on this channel. I'm working on the updated Twitter thread. Save your young ladies, people. Okay. Christine, thank you very much for that super chat contribution. Okay, Ramon says, sorry, I meant to say high fat, low carb. Well, high fat, low carb is not doing what we're doing here. I'll just go and I'll answer this question since it was the very first question from Sam, which is what does happen when we eat fats regarding bile? Why do you recommend not eating too much fat? And so we'll combine that with Ramon's, sorry, I meant to say high fat, low carb comment. There are 3 distinct ways in the research to cause liver injury through diet. Listen carefully. 3 distinct ways to cause cholestasis, toxic leaky bile, liver injury in the research with diet. High fat, low protein, high fructose. Those are the 3 distinct ways in the literature to cause liver injury through diet. The funny thing about the low protein one, that actually came from a birth control study on mice. And they gave the mice, a certain group of the mice, a low protein diet. And they were looking at liver injury after the birth control pills. But the mice who got the low protein diet, even before they got to the birth control pills part where they started them on it, they already had liver injury. Weird that all the elite want to move us towards a low protein, high soy, high bug diet. Bugs are really high in vitamin A too. Weird coincidences. I don't know. So anyway, high fat. What is fat really good at doing? What does the body do to store vitamin A? Do you know that the body can store alcohol in your liver? Ethyl fatty acid esters. You know that the body can store methanol, wood alcohol in your liver, which is in some foods. Methyl fatty acid esters. And it can store vitamin A in your liver as retinol esters. How does your body store? So when people talk about fat-soluble vitamins are stored in your liver, how does your body store fat-soluble toxins? Well, it probably binds them to fat. Fat causes bile dumping. People think that's a good thing. Fat also is going to increase your absorption of fat-soluble toxins from the gut via the bile. And then the more fat that's around, the more you're going to reabsorb the bile. High-fat diets, I do not believe technically high-fat diets, I do not believe they're suitable for humans long-term. People can feel differently. I don't understand how a person living on, let's say we're talking about a natural living human. I'm not going to use the term paleo. I'm going to use just the term natural living human who doesn't have refrigeration, who doesn't have a lot of food storage options. I'm talking about like let's think even just 1700s, 1600s. Okay? Game meat is extremely lean. Even if you're eating fish is so game meat and fish is extremely lean. There's not much fat there. If people are eating fruits and vegetables, there's not much fat there at all. The idea that people would, where would the fat come from? Where would the animal fat come from? The idea of like domesticated cows and stuff, just forget about dairy. Just dairy's a modern thing. The large amounts of dairy, like dairy anytime you want it out of your fridge. Just forget about that. So forget about all that dairy fat. Where'd that go? There's not big fat ribeyes around. I remember as a kid, I've used this story a bunch of times. We used to drive down to Mexico. And when you'd see the cows out in the desert scrub brush, you could see all of their ribs. These were not big fat cows. This is probably how cows look when they're naturally out there. They're not gigantic fat cows. They're lean. Game animals, wild animals are lean. So there goes all that animal fat fantasy, right? Sure, you can get fat off them, but they're generally going to be lean. Nuts and seeds as like a huge source of fat? Seriously, no, that doesn't make any sense. Most people won't eat a lot of nuts unless they're already shelled and they can just shovel them into their face. So beans, grains, almost no fat. Like tell me where in a natural living diet there's going to be 50% of your calories from fat. Why do you think people used to be so lean? Because there wasn't much fat around and because there wasn't much sugar around. Processed sugar. There definitely was no isolated fats for people to just slug down. Like, oh, let's make bulletproof coffee. I mean, seriously, what a joke. And this is nothing against you, Ramon. I'm just pointing out these patterns. I don't believe. Here's another pattern that we can see. Ketones. People will be like, ketones are amazing. How long can your body survive without blood glucose? Can't. How long can your body survive without ketones? It's just fine. It doesn't care. So which of those becomes more necessary? Which of those is like a frivolous kind of like extra thing to use? And which of those is pure survival or you die? Blood sugar, blood glucose. Your body can convert protein into glucose. Your body can, obviously carbs can be converted into it. Fats can be converted into it. That's how desperate your body is to run on that stuff. So the joke is how long can you survive without blood glucose? How long can you survive without ketones? One of them you can live just fine without. The other one, you're dead. So the whole idea of ketones being like the best thing for your body to run on is absolutely a joke, in my opinion, just by that simple example. Your body wants glucose to run the brain. And if it doesn't have enough, it shuts down. So you're doing a high-fat, low-carb diet. That's not what we generally do in the program. So there could be all sorts of problems there. Now, I will say one of the things that PUFAs do, and remember, every fat that you eat, except some weird isolated industrial fat, every fat you eat is going to have some PUFAs in it, polyunsaturated fatty acids, which the mainstream, when you saw pharmaceutical companies start making fish oil, you should have been like, huh? Whoa. Wait, pharmaceutical companies are making fish oil now? We better reevaluate this situation. And all these industrial food companies make the seed oils and all that stuff. PUFAs turn into malondialdehyde in your body, a fatty acid aldehyde, which is super toxic. So the more fats you eat of any type, the more PUFAs you're going to put into your system, the more malandialdehyde you're going to make. Malandialdehyde can directly slow down your ALDH enzyme, which is one of the biggest, most important detox enzymes in your entire system. Funny thing, I was talking about autoimmune disease of the scalp, the alopecia areata earlier. Do you know that in the scalp of alopecia areata people and in the blood of alopecia areata people, they find higher malandialdehyde levels? Interesting, no? So, but high fat, low carb is not generally the approach that I run, because high fat is one of the ways to create liver injury. High fat is how we store fat soluble toxins, forever chemicals, all that stuff. They're stored in the fat, and the bile is how we absorb them. So we want to get rid of the bile, but we also want the bile bound up. That's why we talk about things like soluble fiber and charcoal. So that's what I got for you, Ramon. High fat, low carb diets are probably generally going to be low in potassium also. Plant foods generally are going to have the most potassium. That's just a general thing. And if you're not eating plant foods because you're on a low carb diet, there's that. Now, people come to the program and they don't tolerate carbs very well yet because something in their system broke. Remember, if you could tolerate carbs as a kid and now as an adult you can't tolerate carbs, you broke something in between there. Something broke. It's not that carbs all of a sudden became bad for you, it's that your system broke in some way. And then we fix it. If you haven't seen, I think I did I have a whole big Twitter thread on vitamin A and diabetes and all the research showing that vitamin A increases insulin resistance. And if you're doing a high-fat diet, the thing you must know about a high-fat diet and pure carnivore diets is that because of the lack of plant soluble fiber in them, basically the toxins that they have are just running in a loop through the enterohepatic circulation. They're coming out in the bile, going into the intestine, getting reabsorbed because they're always eating plenty of fat, right? So they're all getting reabsorbed and going right back to the liver, and they're just doing this loop. And they're not escaping because there's nothing to soak up the bile. And so, but then the peripheral circulation, you can see things improve because an all muscle meat carnivore diet is a very low vitamin A and low copper diet. So you see less toxins coming in. They got that right. And then when they start eating soluble fiber again, I've been over examples of this, when people who do that start eating soluble fiber again and the bile starts being dumped majorly, they get lots of symptoms because all that toxic bile had just been storing up and storing up and storing up. It hadn't been escaping. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff coming out soon where people are starting to realize that the keto and the carnivore stuff is just not as suitable for humans as they want to believe. I mean, we have flat molars for a reason. We have a fairly long, we are omnivores. We are omnivores. What do bifidobacteria we're born with the most bifidobacteria in our guts that we're ever going to have in our lives. And what they see is as we get older, the bifidobacteria go down. What do they see in high fat, low carbers or carnivores? They see almost no bifido. What do bifido feed on? Soluble fiber. Bifido is very important to the immune system. I don't know if you guys saw, was it Hazan, the doctor who specializes in the gut biome, where they were just showing that the pokies just basically decimated the bifido population of the gut. And they're causing health problems, you don't say. So you could eat a very low carb, like no plant food diet, high fat, kill the bifido, or you could get a shot, kill the bifido. And they normally see bifido go down in your life. Weird patterns. Remember, they always need two sides to it. They need to have the red and blue, the right and left. They got to have two sides of the argument. That's all they want to give you. They don't want to talk about the middle ground, which is where we live. The middle ground is it requires higher intelligence levels. It does. To go, maybe some of this is good, and maybe some of this is good. But we don't want to do too much of either, or we want to find out what the right amount is for you is. That takes thinking, that takes effort, that takes observation and action. People don't want to do that. Tell me what pill to take, doc. It doesn't work that way. I'm sorry. So if that's what you want, is you want the magic pill, or you want me to just tell you what to eat, don't work with me. That's not how this works. We're at a level above. I am trying to teach you how to fix yourself, because no one else is going to do it for you. Let me see. Let me look through this. I just saw Candace say, I will definitely stop listening to these girls that eat a stick of butter a day. Oh, it's going to just end badly. So let's see. I want to see if there's any more. Oh, Ramon says I was high fat, low carb until I came across you. Okay. Well, so that's okay. Got it, Ramon. Thank you for another super chat. I appreciate that. So yeah, the high fat, low carb, it's just, a lot of these diets look great short term, don't they, folks? Like, wasn't it great? Everybody knows the first time they did low carb, right? And you drop like 6, 8, 10, 12 pounds in like the first 2 weeks, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing thing ever. And you took a lot of the crap foods out of your diet before they started making all these like Atkins, like garbage food, low carb things full of sugar, alcohols, and all that crap. I mean, it did really look good. And I will tell you that when I eat a diet that is mostly meat with some fruit, like I do really well on bananas, with some low vitamin A vegetables. And so I'm not restricting carbs, but that is what I feel best with. You want to know what my father told me before, when I was a 20 something, he said, if I eat meat and fruit and vegetables, I lose weight and I feel great. I was like, at the time I was thinking I was smarter. I was like, well, it can't be that simple, Dad. And now at this age, I'm going, for me, not for everybody else. For me, that general setup works really well. Is that what everybody should do? No. So don't listen to me say what I have figured out over the last 4.5 years to work for me is what you should do. That's why I don't like telling people my diet, because everybody thinks that they should just model it on what I do. And that's not what I'm selling here, folks. I have plenty of people who are like, they can't do bananas at all. Okay, so don't do them. And they're like, I do better with rice. Okay, if you're going to do rice, you sure as heck better make sure you get that arsenic out of it. If you're going to depend on rice, I've talked about this before, you better get the arsenic out of it, because if you are eating rice, you are eating arsenic. You don't get to get away from it. I can see it on your hair test. You can't hide from me. The people who are mixing their rice and soaking it with charcoal before they cook it, that's working. Weird that they use charcoal to treat arsenic in wastewater. Helps get arsenic out of rice too. It would also soak up aldehydes. And if you look up rice and aldehydes, one of the major ways they grade rice is by the aroma. And most of the aroma comes from aldehydes. Weird. So here it is. Pierre said, this was the virus and toxin thing that I was mentioning. Dictionary says, first recorded in 1590 to 1600. Latin for virus means slime or poison. Akin to the Sanskrit visa, V-I-S-A, with some accent marks on it. Avestan visa, Greek ios from earlier, huios from still earlier, wissos, all meaning poison or venom. Don't you just love how they hide it in plain sight? The very root of the word says poison or venom. Antibodies. This is when people are like, my Epstein-Barr virus antibodies I got reactivated. I'm like, no, you got toxic again. Whether it was toxins coming in or whether it was toxic bile coming out. And if they're like, oh, I just had a super stressful time in my life. Well, what does stress do to your bile? You dump bile. If you're sick, the bile leaks where? Into your blood. What do they measure for? Antibodies, your blood. Okay? This is how it is all connected. When you hear about viruses, think about toxicity. When you hear autoimmunity, think toxicity. When you hear cancer, think toxicity. This is why modern medicine has made no progress in fixing your disease or your parents' diseases or anybody else's diseases. Because for them to make progress, they would have to admit that you're toxic and that the solution is to avoid all of this industrial crap that they're forcing on us. It's just the way it is. They can't admit it. Could you imagine if our government, people are like, why isn't our government talked about vitamin A toxicity? Because they're fortifying our foods with it. Because they're putting in your dog's food, your cat's food, and your baby formula. Could you imagine the lawsuits? They can't let it happen. You'll know when you start seeing me getting censored and more. So, oh, Will added this. Etymology of the word, I have no idea how to say that. Fiok, virus in Greek. Iok or veos, virus, means A, poison, B, arrow, C, iron or copper oxide. What do I treat in people? Well, I treat a lot of iron overload and I treat a lot of copper toxicity along with vitamin A. For those of you who are into the protocol ideas, you should know that vitamin A increases your iron absorption. So if you guys are constantly trying to treat iron overload, even though you don't measure ferritin, if you're constantly trying to treat iron overload and you're taking in a bunch of vitamin A, you're constantly making the problem worse. So I undo all that. I just talked to a gentleman just the other day, trifecta. He had vitamin A toxicity, copper toxicity, and iron overload all at the same time. We're going to fix them all because they're all interconnected. So I'm going to read this comment just because it's hilarious. Soil Food Web Warrior, vitamin A toxicity shrinks your balls, and Dr. Garrett Smith has the biggest balls out there. This live was fire. That's just hilarious. That's funny. That's funny. Okay. Oh, I see some more super chats. I'm going to get to them. Okay. It is 9:30, so I gotta wrap it up here pretty quick. But I thank you all for coming. This is great. This is my favorite day of the week. People would think that this might be like the most stressful day of my week, but this is actually the day I look forward to the most. So, let's see. Let's see. Here we go. N Rustica. Talk more about how bile dumps are on a circadian rhythm. I only notice it about once a week. Charcoal. So, okay. Let me get into that. I'll just say something. Will did a super chat. Will of Europa did a super chat. Best doctor. Oh, thanks, Will. I love that. So let me see. Was there anything else? Oh, and Lynn, thank you for your super chat contribution. I appreciate you guys so much. And then so I went over Ramones. Okay, so I don't see any more. So I'll get back to N Rustica. Okay. Bile and circadian rhythm. Well, if you just go and let's slow right now. Wow. Hopefully I didn't lose the whole connection. So I'm just going to do a quick search here. I'm going to go on PubMed if I can ever get there. Man, is the space weather kicking up? Because my computer really slowed down. Okay. Sorry, folks. I didn't go dead air. So we're going to type in bile circadian rhythm. I'm just going to post the search link here in the stream, just so you can go and look, and we'll just talk about a couple of the titles: bile acid metabolism and circadian rhythms. Circadian rhythm disruption influenced hepatic lipid metabolism, gut microbiota, and promoted cholesterol gallstone formation in mice. Circadian clock control of liver metabolic functions. Circadian rhythms in the pathogenesis and treatment of fatty liver disease. Circadian rhythms and bile acid homeostasis, a comprehensive review. Complex interactions between circadian rhythm and diet on bile acid homeostasis in male rats. Okay? So they're connected. Okay? Modern medicine would love to say this. I mean, so could your circadian rhythm, if you mess up your circadian rhythm, will it mess up your bile rhythm? Yes. But if you messed up your bile rhythm somehow by, like, let's say, injuring your liver, could that shift your circadian rhythm? I mean, think about it. Humans, we are designed. Our default state is to be awake during the day and asleep at night. That's the default. So therefore, just like somebody who used to be able to tolerate carbs and now they couldn't, something broke. So if all of a sudden you have somebody who's a night owl and they can't seem to sleep at night, they have bile circadian rhythm. Their bile rhythm is off. And then when you think about the Chinese medicine clock of the organs, right? The liver is 11 to 1 and the gallbladder is 1 to 3 in the morning. When do a lot of people have their bile wake them up? Usually sometime between 3 and 4, right after the gallbladder time has finished. Gosh, where do you store your bile? So how do we fix that? Well, we just fix, first of all, I mean, see, if your body naturally does a bile dump between between 3 and 4. Okay, a lot of people wake up in the middle of the night between 2 and 4 a.m., right? We've all been there. If you dump that bile, if that's just a thing that happens, if that's just, I'm just saying, if that's kind of like a default state of humans, I don't know. It's really, really common though. The only way to fix that from waking you up would be to make your bile less toxic and or to keep your bile in the pathway that it's supposed to be in so you don't absorb it into the bloodstream and then it gets into your blood and then the vitamin A or the copper hitting your brain wakes you up. Now, funny thing is that night shift or late shift work, graveyard shift work, night shift work has been now deemed carcinogenic, a carcinogen. What would night shift working mess up? Your bile rhythm. What do people do a lot of to stay up for night shift work? They do a lot of caffeine or coffee, both of which are stimulants, both of which likely induce bile dumping. What are they using to stay awake? They're dumping bile to stay awake. A lot of people notice if they dump bile in the middle of the night, they wake up. So the connection, I mean, what causes it? It's the body's going to dump bile. It's going to dump bile. What can we do to kind of short circuit the bile dump, at least to keep it from hopefully absorbing into our bloodstream? You can do charcoal. But for those of you who haven't heard me talk about this, charcoal soaks up bile like as well as anything out there. Charcoal is considered a bile acid sequestrant, so it grabs onto bile just as well. Cholestyramine, pharmaceutical bile acid sequestrant, grabs onto bile. Cholestyramine, go look at the side effects list. It's a disaster. I never understand when people come to me and they're like, oh, we want to get rid of the bile. Can I take cholestyramine? And I'm like, go look at the side effect list. It's abominable. Go look at the side effects list for charcoal. It's like, could cause constipation, or if you took obscene amounts of it, it could cause a bowel blockage. There's a couple of case studies of that where people were taking obscene amounts of charcoal. So obscene that it blocked up their bowel. We don't talk about obscene amounts of charcoal. And do I tell people to start things slowly? Yes. Do I tell them that if you're constipated, you shouldn't even be messing with charcoal? Yes, I do. As I've said, I take lots of care in what I do. People who got diarrhea, hey, throw some charcoal down there. Why do you have diarrhea? Because you got too much bile in your bowel. Soak it up. Diarrhea will calm down. In very, very rare people, charcoal can increase bile dumping. I don't know why. I don't know the mechanism. I just know it happens. I just observe and adapt and react. And we start things slow, so you have a dose-dependent response, because if you do a big dose at the start, you may not feel good, but if you do a smaller dose, you'll have a lower response. That's why we start things slowly. Don't be greedy or impatient, or you will pay the price. If you're going to be dumb, you better be tough. That's the saying. That's why we use that. And I have lots of people who come back and they're like, I was dumb and I realized it, and I was not that tough, or not as tough as I thought. So, but charcoal, like I mentioned, I've talked about the guy who I helped, the son of the gentleman I know who I helped at the middle of the night. He was dumping bile. It was going back up into his stomach. He was vomiting every night at about 3 a.m. And we put charcoal down there early, either before he went to bed, or a half hour. He would set an alarm half hour before he woke up, or he would just slug the charcoal as soon as he woke up, because he had about a 5-minute window, he told me, from when he woke up before he'd vomit. We got him off 3 medications that the GI doctor gave him, and we shut down the vomiting in about 3 days. But his circadian rhythm was that, and he was putting so much the bile was so toxic, and it was going the wrong way up into his stomach, that his body then said, the best solution I have right now is to vomit this up. Had to get the toxicity out. Well, if you can bind it with charcoal, you don't have to get it out. I mean, you will get it out. You'll poop it out. But your body's not requiring to vomit it out. So, yeah, if you notice times of the day where all of a sudden you feel terrible, like if you're like every day at 2, first of all, if you crash in the afternoon, if you crash mid-morning or you crash mid-afternoon, you should look at how much fluids you're drinking. Because if you're just doing and when I say fluids, that means stuff in, like if you're eating very watery fruits, if you're doing tea, if you're doing coffee, if you're doing water, if you're doing juice, if you're doing think about grains that you cook or beans that you cook, you put a lot of water into those, right? You put cups and cups of water into those. They soak up that water. So you're eating water in a way with the food. So if you take in tons of fluids and you always crash between 10 and noon, or you always crash between 2 and 4, and you're peeing clear at those times, and you're getting like practically narcoleptic because you're just so tired, you may just be taking in too many fluids. So just chill out. You don't want clear pee. You don't want super clear light yellow pee, like light yellow pee that almost looks clear. You don't want that. You don't want dark smelly pee. You want either light yellow to yellow pee. Do not aim for clear pee. That's not good. You're just peeing out minerals at that point. Minerals and water. So, connection is not good today. Sorry about that. But anyway, the circadian rhythm, we can adjust it. We just try to, again, do I have an approach to fix the circadian rhythm of bile? No. Other than shutting it down if people can with charcoal. You could also use, I'm just going to wait until I see my face moving again. Okay. Hopefully we'll stay on now. Wow, connection's really bad this week. Oh, okay, Lynn, I see your question now. I'll get to that. I saw the super chat from you, Lynn, with no question. And Christine, you had a super chat with, so let me get to this question. So I try to put the super chat with the question in there, so they're together. Try not to do the question separate from it. So I'll get to these, and then I got to wrap it up, folks. Okay, Christine did a super chat. Thank you very much, Christine. Here's the question. Do ionic foot baths help detox through the skin? I know someone with a machine. The water gets dirty with orange-brown flaky particles. Okay. I used to have an ionic foot bath in practice when I had a location and a practice. If you go and I forget what is the name of the company? I still have an ionic foot bath. We run it. We have my mom run it once in a while. Now, this is the company that makes the foot bath that I have. I really appreciated their explanation of what it does. I'm not going to say that. I mean, some people feel amazing from them. Some people don't notice much. The color of the water has nothing to do with anything. You're not detoxing through the feet into the water. That's not the point. What this one company showed, what is it? The ion? What's the something? Let me see. A major difference. Yes, that is the one. Let me see if I can find it. I want to get this cleared up. Okay, so a major difference. The Ion Cleanse. This is the one that I have, and this is I really appreciated. They did do their little study. Let me see, for practitioners. Let me find it. How it works. Is this a video? I don't want a video. Let me just see. Well, I think they sent it with the machine. I'll just put the link in here. What they showed, this company. I love the companies that actually do, even if it's just clinical research like this in their own clinics. They specifically said the water has nothing to do with it. You're not detoxing into the water. What you're seeing in the water is the color change from the electrodes that are in there. And that's why they oxidize and they basically disintegrate over time. If you've ever had a foot bath, you know that those electrodes that are down in the water disintegrate. What do you think's going into the water? The metal. But what they showed was that over the next, I think, day or 2 or 3, they showed that there was increased excretion of toxins in the urine. So they specifically said it's not during the foot bath that the magic happens. It's in the days afterwards, and they showed it. So that is what it is doing. Now, the thing that I'm not so sure about with it is I am not so sure about running currents through the human body long term. We are a biochemical electrical system. And if you start running foreign currents through the system, is that good? Could you mess up the nervous system? Possibly. There's a paper on Lou Gehrig's disease. It's in the Medical Hypotheses Journal about how Lou Gehrig's disease may be related to like electrical muscle stimulation, because one of the things they know Lou Gehrig used to do a ton of was electrical muscle stim. And he degenerated. His nervous system was degenerating. And I think they have some other anecdotal evidence of people who used a lot of electrical muscle stim getting Lou Gehrig's. So simply based on that, I'm not so sure about the foot baths, because they're basically sending a current through the system. How else are they working? They're sending a current into the water, and you're in the water and your feet are there and it's going up into you. I don't know. Like I said, I have one. We don't use it very often. We use it for my mom. I've used it. I've never felt anything from it. My mom says she feels a little better for a while after it. So there could be good from it. It does seem to speed up. If we're seeing more poisons in the urine coming out, when you leak bile into your blood, what's the first detox organ they go to? Kidneys? Come out in your urine? I don't know. I don't know. So when I am not so sure about things like that, like I said, we own one. We tend to use it pretty rarely. And I've used it in practice, and like I said, some people feel a lot better from it. Could be placebo, but there is also the evidence that it does increase detox through the urine. So it's mixed. It's a mixed bag. I don't know. Okay, so then, where is it? Lynn, let me find your, okay. My thoughts on hyaluronic acid. Okay, let me just blow my nose real quick. Tons of people around the world have been reporting lots of sinus congestion. I think there's crap in the air. I bet if we could go and look at particulate counts, I bet they'd be really high. I know there's lots of sulfur dioxide coming out of the earth right now, especially around fault lines. Anyway, my thoughts on hyaluronic acid. I don't have a lot of thoughts on hyaluronic acid. I know that orally and anecdotally, the research on hyaluronic acid being taken by mouth is much better than the injectable stuff. The injectable hyaluronic acid is fairly disappointing, but the oral stuff seems to help. Now, I did add some to the Nutrition Detective magnesium lotion that will be coming out someday, still in formulation, still figuring it out. We had a little hiccup in the formulation where we got to a good formulation, and I like it. And just to double check, I checked with the formulation people and I said, is this all non-GMO? I just want to make sure that nothing snuck in. And he gets back to me and he says, oh, this one ingredient has some GMO in it. I was like, grr. So now we gotta take that ingredient out and figure out a substitute. But it's because I care. I think this magnesium lotion formulation, which will be the strongest on the market when it comes out by far, by like 100 milligrams per teaspoon, it will be amazing. It's going to have a little bit of lactoferrin in it. It's going to have some sodium hyaluronate, which is hyaluronic acid. It's going to be amazing. But it has to be right. As you guys know, when I make supplements, I'm one of the few companies out there that will not put fillers in my pills. We went to a much better contract manufacturer. The lactoferrin came out amazing. So did the Keystone Minerals. They were able to put it in smaller capsules, so they're easier to swallow. They put it in a smaller bottle, so there's less waste. Like, it's all the same formulas. For those of you who have taken it before, same formula, same exact formula. We just got a much better supplement manufacturer that is just doing an amazing job. So we do no additives, no fillers, any of that stuff. We got the new zinc liquid, which is just water and zinc picolinate and water. Water and zinc picolinate. And so it's 2 milligrams a drop, so you can dose it very carefully for those of you who are sensitive to zinc, because a lot of people who are really toxic are really sensitive to zinc. So you either have to not start on zinc or start very slow. Made the zinc liquid so you could do that. Just make sure to shake it up every time. But anyway, yeah, the magnesium lotion it's been like 15 months of formulation to get it right, because I insist on it being right. And now we just had this one last hiccup. We were so close. I guess the formulator guy, when he was suggesting things that we might try, he just forgot this one thing. So let me just check to make sure. But I think hyaluronic acid is pretty okay so far. I haven't found much negative on it. Let's see. Okay. Will, there's no word on the price for the magnesium lotion because we haven't even finished the formulation yet. I'm still waiting on, I was waiting on a quote for this last batch. And then we had the GMO problem. And I was just like, nope. But I've been using this one. I'm still going to, they sent me a sample and I've been using it. It's great. It absorbs great. It's, it's amazing. So I just got to fix that one. It's an emulsifier that's in it to hold it together, because to get that much, magnesium oil, which is magnesium chloride and water, to get that much of it into the lotion, we have to use something to get it to hold up. Oh, and Rustica was saying, to follow up, so when you were waking up in the middle of the night before a dump, is that is the time to use charcoal? So yes, there's a couple things you can try. So this will be the last question. And Soil Food Web Warrior kind of answered it pretty well. To avoid the middle of the night bile dump effects, what you would want to have optimally is the charcoal there in your intestines, in your stomach, in your intestines, to absorb it when it comes out. Right? That's the goal. You could do this by, so remember, if you're really constipated and you do charcoal and you make yourself more constipated, that's not my fault. I've warned you. Can you do other things to help your pooping so you can take charcoal? Sure. But you have to experiment with that to find out what works. Okay. You could do it before bed. Hopefully that would be close enough. Because I mean, if you go to bed at 9 and you dump bile at 3 a.m., I don't know if the charcoal may have moved too far through your gut to be, because your bile ducts come into your small intestine right after your stomach. So the charcoal may have progressed past that and may not be in a great location to absorb it. So that's the least likely to work, but it's also the most convenient, right? These things always tend to come in these packages, right? Least convenient, or least likely to work, but most convenient. Okay, then you get to, if you knew that you wake up every night like 3 a.m. and you wanted to preempt the bile dump, you want to take the charcoal as close as you can to the bile dump, but you want to have it beforehand so it's there very close to the bile dump. You could set an alarm to wake up maybe a half hour before the bile dump, if you know what happens every night. And then you put the glass of water with charcoal in it right by your bed, and whatever else you want to put in it, and just wake up, stir it up, drink it, put it back on the nightstand, go back to sleep. The last option would be, when you wake up, you have the water and the charcoal already set right by your bed. You stir it up, you slug it down. That last one probably has the least likelihood of working, because the reason you woke up is that the bile is already leaking into your blood. You already kind of missed it. The guy I was talking about earlier, his was going into his stomach and it was causing him to vomit. So his bile was going to come up. So you could put the charcoal down as soon as he woke up and it would soak it up and push it back down, if that makes sense. But if you're just waking up and you're not vomiting or with nausea like this guy, it may be going down like it normally should, and then you're absorbing it into the blood, and so you may be too late to catch it. So, right, if you do it before bed, it's most convenient, least likely to work. If you do it after you've already woken up, it might be too late. But it's also convenient because you don't have to wake up to an alarm, which an alarm, I know if I wake up to an alarm, I'm up, because it's that fight or flight thing. I'm like, why did I wake up? And the adrenaline, you wake up with adrenaline and cortisol, right? So if you spike it, I'm not the type, I don't hit snooze alarms. When I wake up, I'm up. That's the way it is. So some people are like that. Some people can just go back to sleep over and over and over and over again, and they're the ones who annoy us with all those snooze alarms. That's so annoying. My goodness. Just going to be honest. If you're a snoozer, everyone else in the room who shares it with you is annoyed at all your snooze alarms. So, let's see. So just so you guys know, I do make, some people have complained about the ads on this. They're all skippable. That's the way I mark them. I make them skippable, and the live stream's free. If the skippable ads are too much for you, I don't know what else to do. I'm sorry. So let me just double check for any more super chats. Let's see. Yeah, Lynn, we got to your question. I think we're done. Okay. So we got 60 live people in here right now. So, yeah, so thank you for coming, everybody. Hope you all enjoyed that little autoimmunity and toxicity thing. That's from a very old article I wrote on my research forum. And then thank you for all the super chats. I'm off to go answer questions in the inner circle ad. No, John, I wasn't worried about you complaining about the ad. There have been other people who have been very vocal about the ads. And so I was mainly addressing that. Your comment just reminded me. That's all. So, anyway, yeah, so hopefully share this. We're about to hit 4,000 subscribers to the channel. So make sure to like and subscribe and do all that stuff. And then we just hit 10,000 followers on Twitter. So things are going well. Help us keep it going. Spread the knowledge. The Nutrition Truth Army is what you people are to me. And I will see you all next week. Have a great weekend. Bye now.